Hello, and welcome to the Deep Dive.
And this is our Reformed Thinking segment.
That's right, the place where we take your sources, your notes, your research, and really try to distill them into crucial knowledge and maybe some surprising insights.
Yeah, our aim is always to help you cut through all that information overload, give you the clearest possible understanding of what really matters most in the material you've shared with us.
Okay, so today we're looking closely at a segment of Jesus's commands, and we're focusing on one that, well, it might seem quite challenging at first glance. We've got some excerpts here from John Piper's book, All That Jesus Commanded, specifically the part called Do Not Be Angry, Trust God's Providence. And we also have some pretty comprehensive notes that you provided alongside it.
Right. And our mission for this deep dive is to really get a handle on Jesus's distinctive teaching about anger. We want to try and discern what anger truly is, and differentiate between anger that, well, that falls short of God's perfect design, and anger that actually aligns with it. And also, crucially, grasp how relying on God's wise, sovereign governance, his providence, how that can shape our emotional responses.
Anger, wow.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that touches everyone, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
In all sorts of ways, from, minor daily irritations right up to dealing with really deep, unsettling injustices. So let's get right into it. What makes Jesus' command on anger are so different, so maybe radical compared to what people might have expected under the law of Moses? Okay, so unpacking this, Jesus' teaching on anger, Matthew 5.2122 is key here, isn't it?
Yes.
It just presents such a striking difference from how things were understood under the law. It seems to go way beyond just outward actions.
It absolutely does. You see, the law of Moses, it primarily zeroed in on the external act, murder. It made it crystal clear. Whoever murders, well, they'd be liable to judgment. That was a clear, tangible standard.
Right, focused on behavior, a guardrail for society, really.
Exactly, a vital one. But Jesus, well, he operates with this divine insight into the very source of human behavior, doesn't he? The heart itself. And he takes that standard and just lifts it onto an entirely new level. He says point blank that everyone who is angry with their brother, just angry, will be liable to judgment.
It's like angry, you're not even acting on it necessarily.
That's right. And he doesn't stop there. He pushes it further. He says, whoever insults their brother, using words like raka, which implies someone's empty-headed, worthless, that person will be liable to the council, a higher kind of judgment.
Okay.
And then even more starkly, whoever calls someone, you fool, which suggests, deep moral failing, maybe even godlessness, that person is liable to the hellfire. So you see, it's not just about what you do, like with your hands or outward behavior. It's about what you feel inside and what you say coming from the very core of your thoughts and intentions.
That really sounds like a complete redefinition of what righteousness even means.
It is.
Jesus just rips open that facade of just, outward obedience. He exposes the heart as the real battleground. So it means you could technically follow the letter of the Mosaic law, maybe never actually commit murder, but still be violating Jesus' standard just by holding on to anger inside.
That's precisely it.
It points to a standard that requires this deep inner alignment with God's character, not just ticking boxes externally.
Yeah.
I mean, for the people hearing this directly from Jesus, that must have been completely startling, challenging their whole idea of what it meant to be good.
Oh, it was undoubtedly a radical thing to say. This move by Jesus, it really highlights that God's concern isn't superficial. He's not just interested in managing external behavior. He's aiming to purify the very source, the spring of human actions, the heart.
Yeah.
And for that first century audience who, let's face it, often focused heavily on that outward adherence to the law.
Yeah, the traditions, the rules.
Exactly. This would have been profoundly challenging. They might have felt pretty righteous because they avoided murder. But Jesus showed them that even that hidden internal animosity, it carried serious spiritual danger. It demands a level of self-examination, an inner holiness that was just far more searching than they probably expected. It makes it so clear that the internal disposition, what's going on inside, is what truly counts in God's eyes. It just elevates the standard for righteousness to a level that, honestly, only a perfect human could naturally meet. It's a call for change that goes way beyond our own willpower.
Okay, so here's something else that really jumped out at me from the notes. This idea that anger often feels, well, spontaneous. Not like a deliberate choice we make. How does that reality, how does it shape our understanding of Jesus' command? If anger isn't something we choose moment by moment, but it just sort of happens to us, Is this an impossible standard?
That's a really crucial observation. And it highlights just how radical Jesus' command is. The material points out very clearly that no one decides to get angry. Anger just happens.
Yeah.
It's often spontaneous, an unpremeditated experience. Just think about it. You don't rationally choose to feel angry after seeing something outrageous, do you? Like some blatant act of cruelty or a profound injustice.
No, you don't weigh the pros and cons.
Exactly. You don't sit there, think it through, and then deliberately say, okay, time to initiate anger. Nobody lives like that. Something happens, and boom, anger just rises up in our heart, often before we've even had a chance to process it properly. And how much it rises, its strength, how long it lasts. That seems to be a mix, right? Combination of the perceived wrong we see and the actual condition of our own mind and heart at that moment. So this makes Jesus' command really distinctive because he's not just calling for, say, self-control over how we express the anger, although that's often part of our duty, of course. His ultimate demand seems to be for a fundamental alteration of our inner state, our mind and heart, so that sinful anger, it simply doesn't rise in the first place.
Wow. Okay, so it's not just about like putting a lid on the pot once it's boiling over,
Right.
but somehow changing the stove so it doesn't even get hot enough to boil. That's a totally different kind of change. I was just thinking, that classic example, someone cuts you off in traffic.
The worst.
That immediate flare-up, that irritation, that clenching, you don't decide to feel it, it just hits you.
Instantly.
That initial spark feels so outside our direct control.
Yeah.
But the source does clarify something important here, right?
Yes, it does.
While that initial feeling isn't maybe willed,
Yeah.
we can choose what we do next, how we react to that spark.
Precisely. That distinction is vital.
You can choose to replay the offense in your head,
Yeah.
feed the anger, make it bigger.
Stew on it.
Or you could choose to focus on something else,
Yeah.
like Christ's mercy or God's bigger picture, maybe try to lessen its grip. So while the immediate flare-up might not be willed, what we do with it, that seems very much our decision, our responsibility.
Exactly. That's where our choice comes in. And this is why Jesus connects this command about anger to his other teachings, things like new birth, repentance, faith.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. He isn't interested in just superficial psychological tweaks. He's interested in renewed people who live by faith in his saving work and his present help. Because without that deep spiritual renewal, which the material makes clear is a gift from God flowing from his grace, well, without that, the spontaneous rise of sinful anger can't really be dealt with at its root. It requires God's guiding rule in our lives. That freedom from sin's condemnation and its bondage, the forgiveness he offers makes a whole new way of living possible.
Yeah.
And this is really where, the Reformed perspective shines. It highlights that true, lasting change comes from God working in us, not just from us trying harder on our own.
Okay, so this whole thing, anger being spontaneous, yet Jesus commanding against it, it makes it really critical that we nail down what anger actually is.
Yes, a clear definition helps.
How does the source help us get a grip on this, often misunderstood emotion?
Well, the source does work towards a useful clarification. It goes beyond just a standard dictionary definition. I mean, a dictionary might say anger is a strong feeling of displeasure and usually antagonism. Simple enough.
Okay, displeasure plus antagonism.
Right.
Right.
But the text immediately points out that's not quite enough. Simple displeasure, like, say, disliking the taste of certain food, that doesn't really count as anger.
Right. I don't get angry at broccoli. I just don't like it.
Exactly. There's a missing ingredient there. And that crucial component, according to the source, is the perception of willfulness, intent. Anger arises from a strong displeasure about something that is happening willfully and we feel should not be happening.
Willfully. That's the key.
That's the key differentiator. It's the perceived intent behind the action that shifts it.
Okay, that distinction sheds a lot of light on it. So, using your food example, if I just find Brussels sprouts unpleasant, that's displeasure.
Right.
But if I start to feel like you're intentionally serving me Brussels sprouts every single meal, knowing I hate them, maybe to annoy me, that's where anger might start to bubble up. It's the perceived purpose, the deliberate choice behind it.
Perfectly put. It's the difference between, say, accidentally bumping into someone on a crowded street
Happens all the time.
and someone deliberately shoving you hard out of their way. The initial physical contact might be similar, but that presence of perceived intent, it transforms the whole emotional response.
Yeah, completely.
That perceived intentionality adds that crucial layer of antagonism. Without that sense of willfulness behind it, the emotion just stays as mere displeasure. And understanding this helps explain why sometimes our reactions can be, well, so misplaced.
That element of perceived willfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely sheds light on those foolish moments we've all probably had, like kicking the cabinet after stubbing your toe.
Oh, yes. Or yelling at the computer.
Exactly. It even brings to mind Jonathan Edwards' famous resolution, #15. What can we draw from this about our misdirected anger when we get angry at things that can't be willful?
Those moments are really telling, aren't they? Kicking a root, smacking a cabinet.
Yeah.
In our clearer, more rational moments afterwards, we usually feel a bit silly about it.
Yeah, definitely.
And why? Because deep down, we're instinctively attributing willfulness, intent, to objects that cannot possibly have it. A root doesn't try to trip you. A cabinet isn't plotting against your head.
Right. Obvious when you think about it calmly.
Exactly. And this intuitive grasp of misdirected intent is why Jonathan Edwards, who was such a central figure in Reformed thought, included in his personal resolutions, specifically number 15, the commitment never to suffer the least motions of anger towards irrational beings.
Wow. Irrational beings.
He was getting right at the core of a certain kind of sinful or at least foolish anger.
That's actually incredibly practical, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Edwards wasn't just being, overly pious or detached. He was analyzing the root cause of what makes some anger irrational or illegitimate.
Precisely.
He recognized that anger, by its nature, is aimed at perceived willfulness. And if there's no will involved, there's no proper target for that specific kind of displeasure. That's remarkable self-awareness.
It really is. And it highlights that a core aspect of sinful or illegitimate anger is misdirecting it where no real intention exists. So it helps us evaluate our own knee-jerk reactions in everyday life. When something frustrates you, whether it's, slow internet, a traffic jam, a malfunctioning appliance, it's really worth pausing for a second. Ask yourself, is there actual willfulness here? Or am I just assigning intent where it doesn't belong?
Is this a person deliberately trying to harm me? Or is it just an inanimate object, an accident, maybe just an unfortunate circumstance?
Right. That little moment of self-assessment can be a vital step. It helps you discern if your anger is legitimate, aimed at real wrongdoing, or if it's a misplaced, potentially sinful response.
It's like an internal check, isn't it? Applying some sound, biblically informed thinking to that spontaneous emotion.
Yes. Recognizing that our reactions often say more about our own inner state, our own expectations or impatience, than about the external thing that provoked us.
Okay, so given all this focus on sinful anger, misdirected anger,
Yeah.
it might start to seem like all anger is wrong. Like it's something we should just try to scamp out entirely.
That's a common conclusion to jump to.
But the source makes a really significant point here. Jesus himself showed anger.
Yes, crucially.
So how do we reconcile Jesus' anger with his command against anger? What does his example teach us about the possibility of, good anger?
This is such a pivotal distinction, and it's absolutely essential for a balanced biblical understanding. The source is clear. Jesus experienced and expressed anger, and that tells us right away that anger itself is not inherently sinful. If it were, Jesus, being sinless, could not have displayed it.
Okay, so where do we see this?
Well, think about some of those striking instances in the Gospels. Mark 3, verse 5. He looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. This was when the religious leaders were unwilling to allow healing on the Sabbath. They were prioritizing their rigid rules over compassion.
Right, and notice his anger is coupled with grief there.
Exactly. That points to a pure motivation. Displeasure at their sin, yes, but also sorrow for their spiritual blindness. It wasn't just personal irritation. Then you have him cleansing the temple, weaving a whip, overturning tables, driving out those who were turning God's house into a marketplace.
That was definitely forceful action.
Very forceful. John 2, Matthew 21 mention it. And think about the incredibly strong rebukes he gave the scribes and Pharisees, calling them blind guides, whitewashed tombs in Matthew 23. These are not weak, passive responses. They are clear expressions of righteous indignation against hypocrisy and spiritual decay.
Okay, so Jesus, the perfect human, the sinless one, clearly displayed anger. And the source also mentions that the Bible talks about other holy figures experiencing righteous anger: Moses, Nehemiah.
Important examples.
And perhaps most significantly, God himself is frequently described as having wrath against sin and injustice.
Yes, throughout Scripture.
which means if anger itself were inherently sinful, then God, who is the ultimate standard of goodness and holiness, couldn't possess it.
Oh, logically, no.
So the real question isn't if anger is present, but what kind of anger it is. What makes it righteous or unrighteous? What are the characteristics of anger that actually aligns with God's design?
Precisely. That's the critical distinction. This gives us solid biblical ground for understanding that not all anger is inappropriate or sinful. It forces us to move beyond a simplistic black and white view that says all anger bad.
Right.
Instead, it pushes us to discern, to analyze. So the solution isn't trying to eliminate every feeling we might label anger. It's about defining what makes anger good, aligning with God's character and Jesus' example, and what makes it fall short, becoming sinful. And the source helps us identify the governing principles for that. This is so important for our own self-assessment, for cultivating a heart that truly reflects God's will, even when we're faced with evil or injustice.
We need to learn how to have that righteous displeasure against sin
Yes.
without letting it curdle into personal bitterness or revenge.
That's the challenge.
So, if good anger does exist, what sets it apart from the anger that leads to judgment? Our sources outline three key factors, three governing principles that determine whether our anger aligns with God's perfect plan. First, it has to be governed by love. Second, it needs to be perfectly proportionate. And third, it must be governed by trust in God's sovereign care, His providence. Let's delve into these, starting with love.
Okay, these three are indeed the pillars. They're like guardrails for our anger, guiding us in discerning if it's aligning with God's character. So let's look at that first one, how love interacts with anger. For human anger to be good, to be righteous, it absolutely must be governed by love, like for the very people who are making us angry.
Okay, that sounds immediately challenging, almost contradictory to how we normally experience anger.
It is perhaps the most counterintuitive, yet deeply Christian part of this whole discussion. Think about Jesus' commands, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, or do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you.
Hard commands.
Very hard. But they exert a controlling influence on our anger. They have to. This means that legitimate, righteous anger cannot delight in the downfall or desire the condemnation of the person causing the anger. It can't. If our anger is going to be considered good in God's eyes, it has to be compatible with genuinely desiring that person's ultimate good. Compatible with praying for them, even working for their well-being, even while we feel strong displeasure at their actions or their sinful heart.
That's a radical idea, isn't it? It implies I can be genuinely angry at what someone does or at the sin driving their actions. But at the same time, still want what's ultimately best for them, including their repentance, their reconciliation with God.
That's exactly it.
It's not about ignoring the wrong or pretending it didn't happen, but it's about directing that strong displeasure at the evil, at the sin, while still holding on to a fundamental desire for the person's ultimate good.
You've got it. It completely challenges the common assumption that anger automatically equates to wanting vengeance or harm.
Yeah, usually they feel linked.
They often are in our sinful state.
Yeah.
But this shows that righteous anger and benevolence can actually coexist within the human soul, and we see this mirrored perfectly in God's own character and in Jesus.
Right, you mentioned his anger being mixed with grief.
Exactly. Mark 3.5 again. Grief at their hardness of heart. That's love and displeasure side by side. It's a strong disapproval of the action and the corrupt heart behind it, but simultaneously desiring their good, praying for it, working for it. Anger like that, governed by that kind of love, wouldn't have to be sinful. It's a holy dissatisfaction with evil that doesn't spill over into personal, vengeful desires against the person.
That's what sets it apart then, from the common sinful anger that's usually laced with bitterness, hostility, maybe even hatred.
Yes, it's rooted in a fundamental attitude of goodwill toward the person, even as their actions are being denounced.
Okay, the second governing factor you mentioned is proportion. What does it mean for our anger to be proportionate? And why is that so critical?
Proportion simply means that a holy or righteous response to evil should match the seriousness of the evil. It should be proportionate to the degree of moral flagrancy, as the source puts it.
Okay, like the punishment should fit the crime, sort of.
Exactly. Just as civil justice tries to vary punishment according to the severity of the offense, you wouldn't give the harshest penalty for a minor infraction. So too, the degree of our anger should align with the seriousness of the moral wrong. If our anger is wildly out of proportion to the actual offense, then it's not good anger. It's not righteous.
Can you give an example?
Sure. The source uses the example of a father just raging uncontrollably, yelling, maybe even hitting because his 3-year-old son accidentally spilled a glass of milk.
Okay, yeah, that's clearly excessive.
Right. While the spill might be inconvenient, maybe frustrating, the child's action was unintentional, minor. It certainly doesn't warrant that kind of extreme emotional or physical reaction from an adult. That's a clear case of disproportionate anger. It shows a lack of self-control, a lack of proper discernment about what truly matters. It's anger that's more intense than the offense calls for, so it falls short of God's standard.
That makes perfect sense. It's about calibrating our emotional response to the actual weight of the wrong. Our displeasure shouldn't be this uniform, overwhelming flood for every little slight.
Precisely.
But the source makes another really interesting point here. It says that too little anger can also be a fault.
Yes, this is important too.
That seems counterintuitive to a lot of people. How can a lack of anger be wrong? Isn't less anger always better?
Not necessarily. It's also crucial to grasp that too little anger, or maybe even the complete absence of anger, can be a fault in certain situations. When faced with serious sin, with grave evil, a lack of anger can indicate that we're being undiscerning. Or maybe just insensible, numb to the actual seriousness of sin, insensible to how it offends a holy God and how much harm it does to people.
Can you give examples of that?
Well, think about things like human trafficking or deep-seated corruption in leadership that harms the vulnerable, or maybe outright blasphemy against God. If you encounter those kinds of things or learn about them and you feel nothing, no strong displeasure, no righteous indignation stirring within you, that could indicate a serious problem with your moral compass, your spiritual sensitivity.
So in those cases, a lack of anger is actually disproportionate to the evil.
Exactly. It's disproportionately low. It's not good. It might reflect a kind of spiritual apathy or a failure to properly value God's holiness, his justice, his standards. Think back to Jesus cleansing the temple. His anger was a righteous, proportionate response to the desecration of a holy place and the exploitation of worshipers.
Right. A lack of anger from him in that situation would have seemed wrong. Like he didn't care.
Precisely. It would have been a defect, not a virtue. So a lack of anger can mean our hearts aren't properly tuned to what God values, what he hates, what grieves him.
Okay, this third factor then. God's governing care, or providence. This sounds truly fundamental for overcoming sinful anger. It seems like the real linchpin that allows us to handle anger in a godly way. Can you help us grasp its scope? How does it practically work?
Yes, this is indeed one of the most significant and perhaps comforting truths Jesus taught that directly helps us find freedom from sinful anger. God's governing care, his providence, is his wise and sovereign control over all things, everything, and specifically for the ultimate good of his children.
All things.
Yeah.
That's comprehensive.
It is. And our anger, its rise, its strength, how we manage it should be guided and shaped by our trust in this reality. This means understanding, truly believing that God is ruling, he is sovereign, even over the very evil that is making us angry right now. And this is key. He will not allow anything to ultimately befall us, his children, that is not ultimately for our good, even if we cannot possibly see how in the midst of it.
Okay, but that doesn't mean God causes the evil, right?
Well, absolutely not. God is never the author of evil, but he is sovereign over it. He permits it, yes, but he directs it. He limits it. He even uses it within his larger perfect plan to bring about his good purposes. He weaves even the sinful actions of others into his grand design, ultimately bringing about what is right and just and good for those who love him.
So this isn't just some abstract theological doctrine then. It has incredibly practical implications for our emotions, especially anger.
Hugely practical.
If I truly believe that God is in sovereign control, even over the bad things, the hurtful things, the unjust things that happen, then that bitterness, that sting, that raw hostility, maybe that consuming desire for personal payback that often fuels sinful anger, that should start to diminish, shouldn't it?
It should, because it removes that terrifying sense that evil has the final word, or that you're just adrift, a victim of random chaos or unchecked malice.
It provides a deep underlying peace or stability, even in the storm, that can recalibrate how we react emotionally.
Exactly. The source says this belief removes the bitterness and sting and hostility from anger. It assures us that evil doesn't win in the end. It serves God's hidden, wise designs. And Jesus gave us such a vivid picture of this. He addressed our deepest fears head-on, which directly impacts how we react emotionally when we feel wronged. Remember, he told us, do not fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Instead, fear God, who holds ultimate power.
Matthew 10.
Yes. And then he added that beautiful illustration to show God's absolute granular control, are not two sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father, but even the hairs of your head are all numbered.
Every single one.
Every single one. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. The point is inescapable. Even the tiniest details of life are under God's loving, careful control. His awareness of our situation, of every single thing that happens to you, is total and complete.
That is a truly profound reassurance, isn't it?
Yeah.
It means whether it's a relatively minor frustration, like, I don't know, a delayed flight,
Or a misplaced file.
or a major life earthquake, like a betrayal or a serious illness,
Yeah.
it hasn't caught God off guard. He knows. He's involved.
Yes. And for you, the listener, thinking about this, it means you can actually respond to those frustrating, anger-inducing circumstances without contradicting your fundamental confidence in God's care. It's not about being passive, like giving up. It's an act of trust. A trust that allows you to process that anger differently, knowing that ultimately God is working all things together for your good. It frees us from that awful feeling of being just a helpless victim of randomness or someone else's malice. And Jesus took this even further. He addressed the most extreme forms of persecution his followers might face. He predicted they'd be betrayed by family members, handed over to authorities, even put to death for his name's sake.
The ultimate injustice.
The ultimate earthly injustice. Yet, in that same context, he declared, "But not a hair of your head will perish."
How can that be if they might be put to death?
It illustrates that even when facing physical death, God's governing care is still absolute. It will guide all the evil directed against us in such a way that his good, eternal purposes for us are met. It's not a promise that you won't experience hardship, suffering, or even martyrdom, but it is a promise that even through those things, nothing can touch your ultimate well-being in God. His good purposes for you will be fulfilled.
So the perishing refers to ultimate spiritual destruction, not necessarily physical harm.
Exactly. And knowing this, believing this, it removes the ultimate bitterness and sting from sinful anger. That anger often comes from feeling ultimately wronged, helpless, hopeless. This confidence in God's sovereignty reframes suffering. It's still painful, yes, but it's seen as being under God's wise, loving hand, serving a greater righteous end.
Wow. Okay, this teaching on God's governing care, it leads directly into what feels like a truly startling command from Jesus. The command to actually rejoice when facing unjust persecution.
Yes. Matthew 5 again.
That just seems to completely defy human nature, doesn't it? Our gut reaction, our natural inclination when treated unfairly, especially for doing good, is, well, it's usually fury, rage, bitterness.
Absolutely.
It feels fundamentally wrong.
So how does rejoicing possibly relate to anger in those situations? And maybe more pointedly, how is it even possible? This is really where God's governing care, his providence, most vividly intercepts and alters our ordinary emotional programming. Jesus commands, "Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account." Then he says, "Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven."
Rejoice and be glad. Luke's account even says, leap for joy.
Leap for joy. Think about that. Few things make us more infuriated than being treated unjustly, lied about, attacked for our faith or for trying to do what's right. Yet Jesus doesn't just say, try to manage your anger or endure it. He commands, rejoice. He fundamentally shifts the expected emotional response away from despair or rage towards active joy.
But that sounds almost contradictory. How can you genuinely rejoice while you're being reviled and persecuted? Doesn't that imply you somehow approve of the injustice? Or that you don't care about the truth being attacked?
That's a fair question.
It seems to fly in the face of what we normally consider a healthy, natural response to being wronged. Many people would argue you should be angry at injustice.
And they might be right, in a sense. Rejoicing doesn't mean we suddenly approve of the mistreatment. It doesn't mean we stop believing it's unjust or wrong. And interestingly, the source suggests it probably doesn't mean there's no anger present whatsoever.
Really, anger and joy together.
Possibly. Some kind of holy anger, that strong emotional disapproval of the evil, the sin, the injustice, might actually be emotionally compatible with an overriding sense of joy. Think about it this way. The human soul, made in God's image, is incredibly complex. We can hold multiple emotions. We grasp theologically that God himself experiences both perfect righteous anger against sin and perfect joy in his redemptive plan simultaneously. He sees and responds perfectly to all evil and all good at the same time.
Okay.
So too, perhaps, our souls, though fallen, retain a capacity to hold both our righteous displeasure at the sin directed towards us and an overriding joy. A joy rooted in God's sovereign plan and his ultimate triumph over evil.
That's a powerful thought. So, true freedom from sinful anger doesn't necessarily mean feeling nothing negative when faced with evil.
Not necessarily a complete absence of displeasure, no.
Instead, it's about an emotional state where joy, a joy rooted in God's ultimate control, his promises, his purposes becomes the dominant note, even in the toughest circumstances.
Yes, it's a joy that transcends the immediate pain and injustice because its focus is fixed on something much greater, something eternal.
It shifts our whole perspective,
But
away from the immediate suffering toward the ultimate reward and God's perfect design unfolding.
precisely. Our joy amidst persecution is possible because of God's governing care. That knowledge we talked about, not a hair of your head will perish, no harmful blow falls without your Father's will, that confirms God's care is governing your suffering. It's his permission, his wise allowance, his ultimate control working for your good,
Okay.
and of the promise of a great reward in heaven. That's Jesus' explicit argument for why joy, not sinful anger, can and should govern our experience of persecution.
It redirects our focus
Yes.
from the immediate infuriating injustice
Yes.
to God's larger good purposes and our secure eternal reward.
Exactly. Good anger, therefore, righteous anger, is governed ultimately by faith. Faith in the all-wise, all-powerful, merciful providence of God. It is this firm belief, this trust in God's sovereignty, that fundamentally reshapes our emotional landscape. It's what allows us to find deep, genuine joy, even in the midst of tribulation.
Okay, this entire discussion
Mm-hmm.
about anger often just happening and Jesus demanding this incredibly deep alteration of our very mind and heart, it really points towards a kind of interchange that feels, well, utterly beyond our own strength, our own doing.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't simply choose not to feel sinful anger or rise spontaneously, how is this radical transformation even possible for us? It honestly sounds like a standard that we, by ourselves, just cannot possibly meet.
You've absolutely hit upon a central point from the material, and it's really a core tenet of Reformed theology. Jesus' command against sinful anger. It's not something we, in our own strength, can accomplish, period. It demands, as the source says, a change in our condition, a deep inward transformation of mind and heart.
Not just behavior modification.
Not at all. This isn't about mere psychological adjustments or learning better self-help techniques, however helpful those might be in other ways. This is about a fundamental spiritual renewal. One that alters the very wellspring of our emotions, aiming to prevent sinful anger from even rising in the first place. And this interchange is directly tied to those other crucial teachings of Jesus we mentioned. New birth, repentance, faith.
It's about becoming a new person, essentially.
Yes, it's about a spiritual rebirth, a turning away from our old patterns of sin, and a deep, abiding trust in him that empowers us to live in a completely new way.
So this isn't just about, trying harder to control my temper or just resolving to be a better person.
Yeah.
It's about a foundational spiritual work within us, something that changes who we are from the inside out, not just polishing the outside.
That's right.
And that really sounds like something only God himself can actually bring about in a person. It has to be a gracious act from him.
Precisely. This underscores the absolute necessity of divine action, of God's grace, for any genuine, lasting change in the human heart. Ultimately, our ability, our capacity to live by this command against sinful anger is rooted entirely in our relationship with Jesus himself. Remember his analogy. He is the vine, we are the branches.
Close at 15.
John 15. And then he declared so clearly, without him we can do nothing. Nothing of eternal value, nothing that truly pleases God.
Right.
This means obeying this command, not being angry in a way that falls short of God's perfect plan, is only possible by living by faith. Faith in his saving work on the cross, and faith in his present, ongoing help through the Holy Spirit. He shed his blood for our forgiveness, paying the debt we could never pay. He paid the ransom price for our freedom from sin's bondage, breaking its power over us. He brought the kingdom of God near so we could actually experience God's guiding rule in our lives right now, shaping us from within. It is this active, ongoing reliance on him, this daily walking with him, trusting him, that enables such a radical alteration of our inner landscape, including our anger responses.
That really does offer genuine hope, doesn't it? And clear direction for you, the listener. The standard Jesus sets for our hearts is incredibly high. It seems impossible on our own.
It is impossible on our own.
But the provision, the power to meet that standard comes not from our own grit and willpower, but from God's gracious work through Jesus.
Yes, that's the gospel hope.
The clear reminder that our sanctification, our growth in holiness, becoming more like Christ. It's a cooperative effort with God.
Yeah.
He enables what he commands.
He does.
It means we don't face this massive challenge of dealing with sinful anger alone.
Exactly right. It means that when you feel that spontaneous rise of sinful anger, your first move isn't just to grit your teeth and fight it with willpower alone. Your first move is to turn to the one who provides the inner alteration, the strength, the grace, to depend on him. This is really the heart of Reformed teaching on sanctification. God's grace is sufficient, not just for getting saved, but for living the Christian life day by day. Sufficient for conforming us to the likeness of Christ, even in the messy reality of our emotional lives, making us truly new creations, bit by bit.
Well, what a liberating yet definitely challenging picture of anger we've unpacked today.
Mm,
It's clearly not about just stifling every negative feeling or becoming emotionless robots,
not at all.
but it's about allowing God's good purposes,
Mhm.
his sovereign care, his love, his standards of proportion, allowing all that to shape our inner world and consequently our immediate responses.
Indeed, it's about aligning our hearts with His. And perhaps as you, our listener, consider this truth, maybe think on this question. If God's all encompassing, sovereign, governing care truly extends even to the smallest sparrow, and He knows every single hair on your head, how might intentionally trusting in that same detailed, loving, powerful care begin to reshape your immediate response the very next time something ignites anger within you?
That's a fitting thought to leave us with, something practical to chew on. Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. Until next time, keep seeking to know more.